Imagine trying to let go of someone, not just physically, but emotionally. You delete the photos, you stop the calls, you cut off contact, and yet something still pulls at you. A tightness in your chest, a thought that won't leave, a dream that sneaks in uninvited. You've done everything right, but the bond is still there. Why? Stay with me until the end, because we're going to explore what Jung and modern psychology reveal about this invisible thread, how it's formed, why it controls you, and most importantly, how to break free. What you'll learn might not just help you move on, it might change how you see every relationship you've ever had. Carl Jung believed that the people we are drawn to, and those we struggle to let go of, are never random. They reflect something in us, often something buried deep. He called it a psychic projection, a part of your unconscious that you cast onto another person. You don't just fall for them, you fall for a part of yourself that you see in them. And this is where it gets dangerous, because when they leave, it's not just their absence you feel. It's like losing a part of your own identity. You might think you're grieving the person, but what you're really mourning is the reflection they held up to you, the validation, the fantasy, the part of you that came alive in their presence. That's why it hurts so much. That's why it lingers. And the worst part? You don't just lose them, you lose the version of yourself that existed only in that relationship. This is why emotional detachment can feel like death, because on a psychological level, it is. It's the death of an identity, a narrative, a shared illusion. And Jung warned, if you don't confront the reason why this person held such power over you, you won't actually move on. You'll just find someone new to project onto, someone new to keep the cycle going. We'll go deeper into that cycle in the next section, and you'll start to see why letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about facing a part of yourself you've been trying to avoid. You tell yourself you're done. You remind yourself of all the reasons it didn't work. You try to hate them, forget them, move forward. But your mind doesn't listen. Late at night, it replays old memories. In moments of silence, it whispers, "What if?" It holds on, not because you want it to, but because it believes it has to. Why does this happen? Psychologically, the bond you formed wasn't just emotional, it was neurological. When you shared vulnerability, intimacy, or even chaos with this person, your brain created powerful associations. It released dopamine when they smiled at you. It flooded with cortisol during arguments. Over time, this mixture of reward and stress built something far stronger than love: addiction. Addiction to intensity, to validation, to their version of you. Carl Jung believed the psyche craves wholeness. And when we meet someone who awakens parts of ourselves, parts we didn't know existed, we latch onto them. They become a mirror for our unconscious, reflecting back not who we are, but who we might be. That potential becomes intoxicating. But here's the paradox. The more unconscious the bond is, the harder it is to break. Because you're not just letting go of a person, you're letting go of a fantasy, of an inner wound that hasn't been healed, of a self that hasn't been made whole. And this is why most advice about letting go fails. Move on. Block them. Focus on yourself. It doesn't work because it treats the symptoms, not the root. The root is meaning. The reason your mind holds on is because it believes that person was the key to something essential: love, purpose, redemption. Until you rewrite that belief, you will stay trapped. And the tragedy? Many never realize they're holding on to something symbolic. They think it's about love or closure or chemistry, but it's not. It's about you and what you were seeking in them. Carl Jung taught that the greatest forces in our lives are not the ones we see, but the ones we don't. He believed that when we form powerful emotional bonds, especially those that feel irrational or overwhelming, we're often witnessing the unconscious at work. These are not just relationships, they are encounters with our shadow. The shadow in Jungian psychology is the part of the psyche that holds everything we reject or suppress. desires, fears, unresolved wounds. When you meet someone who triggers your deepest emotions, love, obsession, pain, euphoria, they are not just another person. They are a symbol of something buried within you. That's why it feels so intense. Some people walk into your life and seem to awaken something ancient. They make you feel alive, seen, understood. But often, what they awaken is not clarity, it's chaos. And yet, you cling. Because somewhere deep inside, your unconscious believes, this person completes something in me. Jung called this projection. You take what is unconscious in yourself, your hidden needs, unlived potentials, unresolved wounds, and you project them onto another. You don't fall in love with them. You fall in love with the part of yourself they reflect. And this is the cruel trick of unconscious attachment. It disguises itself as destiny, when in fact, it is repetition, a reenactment of old patterns, a mirror of inner fragmentation. You're not just missing the person, you're missing the version of yourself you became around them, the version that finally felt awake or worthy or powerful, or even needed. And so you return to them in your mind, not to relive love, but to retrieve that self. But here's where it becomes dangerous. If the bond was rooted in trauma, chaos, or emotional inconsistency, your unconscious may equate pain with intimacy. You crave what hurt you because it feels familiar, because it matches your earliest templates for love. This is why detachment feels like death. It's not just the person you're losing, it's a piece of your identity. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So how do you break the spell? You don't just cut contact. You make contact with yourself. You look at what this person represented. You ask, what part of me was I trying to find through them? That question alone can change everything. Because once you see the attachment for what it really is, not fate, but a mirror, you stop chasing the illusion and you start reclaiming the parts of yourself that you gave away. Next, we'll go deeper into the emotional architecture of trauma bonds, how they form, why they feel so magnetic, and why logic alone will never set you free. Some relationships feel like a drug. They flood you with intensity, elation, and meaning, then drop you into confusion, withdrawal, and despair. And yet, no matter how much it hurts, part of you doesn't want to let go. Why? Because the pain feels like proof that it mattered. This is the trap of a trauma bond. It's not love. It's survival masquerading as connection. And until you understand its structure, it will keep pulling you back, even after you think you've escaped. A trauma bond forms when affection is mixed with unpredictability. Warmth is followed by distance. Attention is followed by silence. You're conditioned to chase the high, to seek validation, to prove your worth. This intermittent reinforcement, love given, love withheld, hijacks the nervous system. It creates obsession, not because the other person is special, but because your mind is trying to resolve the inconsistency. In Jungian terms, trauma bonds awaken the most unconscious parts of the psyche: abandonment wounds, unmet childhood needs, survival fears. The person becomes not just someone you want, but someone your unconscious needs to fix an old story. And that's what makes it so powerful. You're not just trying to stay close to them, you're trying to heal through them. If you can just get them to love you consistently, to choose you fully, to finally see you, you'll undo the pain that came before them. But it never works, because they were never the source of the pain. They were just the trigger. And here's the most painful truth. The bond wasn't strong despite the chaos. It was strong because of it, because the chaos mirrored your inner world. It felt familiar. It felt like home. So what happens when you try to leave? Your mind panics. You second-guess everything. You replay the best moments. You inflate their good traits. You minimize the harm. This is not weakness. This is your nervous system trying to keep you bonded to the person it believes your survival depends on. But you're not dying. You're healing. And healing means seeing clearly. It means recognizing that consistency is not boring, it's safe. That peace is not emptiness, it's clarity. That love is not proven by how much pain you're willing to endure, it's proven by how much truth you're willing to face. Letting go isn't just about losing someone, it's about losing the part of yourself that was built around them. When you form a deep emotional bond, especially one rooted in trauma, you don't just attach to the person. You attach to the identity that came with being with them, the role you played, the version of you that existed in their world. And this is where it gets complicated. Because even if the relationship was damaging, that identity still gave you something. Purpose, validation, a story, something to fight for, something to fix. Without them, who are you? This is why people stay long after they know they should leave. Because walking away doesn't just mean losing the person. It means facing a void, a silence, a question you've been avoiding. What if I'm not enough on my own? Carl Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow, the part of ourselves we reject, fear, or don't fully understand. And in relationships, we often outsource that shadow to another person. We let them carry the weight of our unmet needs, our insecurities, our hidden desires. They become the mirror, the scapegoat, the savior. And when they leave, or when we leave them, we're left face to face with everything we projected onto them. That's what makes letting go so terrifying. It's not just grief, it's exposure. You begin to feel everything they distracted you from. Old wounds, deep fears, a haunting loneliness, the kind of emptiness that doesn't scream but quietly asks if you were ever truly whole to begin with. And yet, that's the doorway. Because what feels like the loss of love is actually the invitation to self-reclamation. It's the moment your psyche calls you back, not to find another person to complete you, but to meet the parts of yourself you've abandoned in pursuit of being loved. Letting go, then, is not an ending. It's a return to sovereignty, to clarity, to the quiet strength that was buried under need. But to access that, you must be willing to face the silence without filling it, to feel the ache without numbing it, to say, "This hurts, and I won't run from it anymore." You've heard the phrase, "just move on." As if healing were a straight line, as if the answer to deep emotional pain is simply distraction, distance, or time. But Jung would say otherwise, because what we call moving on is often just running away. Real healing doesn't come from forgetting, it comes from understanding. It's not about finding someone new or filling the void. It's about becoming someone new by finally facing the void. This is the hardest part, because it requires you to feel everything you've been avoiding, the anger, the guilt, the fear, the yearning, and not just feel it, but learn from it, to sit in the storm without needing it to end, to let your wounds speak before you try to silence them. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Most people move on too quickly because they're terrified of what they might find within. But that avoidance only guarantees one thing: repetition. You'll end up in the same dynamic with a different face. You'll recreate the same pain under a new name, and your soul will keep whispering, "Not again." Learn it this time. Healing, then, is a confrontation, not with your ex, not with the past, but with yourself, with the parts of you that clung to what hurt you, with the unmet needs that made you stay, with the fantasies you believed in because the truth felt too painful. But here's the beauty. Once you stop outsourcing your healing to time, or to someone else's apology, or to a new relationship, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop being the person who was hurt and start becoming the person who learned, the person who grew, the person who woke up. And in that awakening, you gain something rare: discernment. The ability to see clearly, to choose wisely, to set boundaries not out of fear, but out of self-respect. You no longer need to be chosen because you've chosen yourself. You no longer chase connection because you've created it within. You no longer fear being alone because you've met the parts of you that were once abandoned. This is what it means to move inward, to build a sanctuary inside your own soul that no one can take away. And from that place, real love becomes possible, because it's no longer rooted in need, it's rooted in truth. So let go, not to forget them, but to remember you. If this resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe to The Existential Edge for more videos like this.